Next up, to discuss ways to modernize the local grid for a better future, please welcome Moderator Mark Esguerra, Director of Transmission and Substation Engineering at Southern California Edison, and panelists Paul Carp, Strategic Account Executive at Schneider Electric, and Lauren Nevitt, Senior Director of Public Policy at Sunrun.
Good afternoon. Great to be here. My name is Mark Esguerra. I'm the Director of Southern California Edison's Transmission and Substation Engineering team, as well as I'm the lead director helping build the grid and get the grid ready for LA 28. It's a pleasure here to be talking to you about all the work that we're doing to get the grid ready, in addition to how those investments that we're making are going to provide great value long after the games are here. So when you think about preparing for the Summer Olympics, some of the things that come to mind largely are going to be about some of your favorite athletes. How are they preparing? Some of the teams that are from other countries, how are they going to get ready? Who's going to be on the team? You're also thinking about the events themselves. Who's going to place? Who's going to be there? You think of the venues. You know, how's the cities preparing? How's the venues going to look like? You know, one thing most people aren't thinking about? They're probably not thinking about the electric grid. Now, with the electric grid, it takes more to get ready for a large event like this. It takes more than just keeping the lights on. As you can see, it's a coordinated ecosystem of various players to really do this coordination to really have the grid ready here to get it ready for the games. If I was to summarize what Southern California Edison's commitments are here for getting the grid ready for the games, I would probably list it in three different categories. One, we're building. We're accelerating our build to be able to meet the needs of when the games are going to occur. And in some of those cases, there's some upgrades that we probably weren't going to do for another 1 or 2 years after the games, but because of the games, we're accelerating that build. And some of those upgrades are more, they're looking at rebuilding our power lines, replacing our undersized transformers, and in some cases, rebuilding our substations. The second area is we're looking to modernize our grid. Not only are we looking to use some of the traditional infrastructure that utilities use, but we're also looking at, are there opportunities where there's huge value by deploying some advanced technologies, newer technologies that maybe we had not yet considered. And third, we're also looking at this from how do you harden our grid infrastructure from a reliability, resiliency perspectives to be able to provide the needed reliability for some of the venues that we have. And so when you put all those together, not only do you have a grid that becomes a great grid to serve the games, but you also have a grid that's reliable, resilient, and affordable for the communities long after the games are here. So some things here that I would want to also cover here is that, of course, the utilities themselves, we can't do it alone. Partnerships here really, really matter. And today I'm excited to be joined by 2 different organizations that are partnering with Southern California Edison to really help us get our grid ready to be able to meet the demands of the grid here. So the 2 organizations, the first one I have to my right is Sunrun. So Sunrun is helping us explore how distributed energy resources and virtual power plants are helping us meet the needs of our customers. I'm joined here by Lauren Nevitt. And then to Lauren's right, we're joined by Paul Carp from Schneider Electric, and Schneider is helping us modernize our grid infrastructure and with new technology. So we'll start off first with Lauren here, and maybe the first question here I'd like to dig into virtual power plants. So question for you, Lauren. As part of Edison's work to modernize our local grid, we've been piloting, enabling different types of technical virtual power plants. Many people have heard of the term virtual power plant or the acronym VPP, but not sure if everyone understands what they really are. Can you help explain what are virtual power plants?
Sure thing, Mark. It's so great to be here with you today, and thanks to everybody for joining us and listening to this. But we'll try not to be too wonky of an energy policy discussion. But to start with definitions, virtual power plants, or what we at Sunrun like to call distributed power plants, because there's really nothing virtual about it, is really just simply an aggregation of and coordination of distributed energy resources like home batteries and thermostats and other technologies that you might find in your home that, when aggregated and through software by an aggregator like Sunrun, can provide real and scalable electricity back to the grid. So all those little points of light across the LA basin, whether in your home or garage, are actually really meaningful. And not only are they reliable, and we've proven this time and time again, so they're not really new technologies anymore, but they're affordable. They're actually a lower cost resource many times for the grid. And working with partners like Edison, and we do throughout California and throughout the country, we can really send electrons back to the grid from, generated from your rooftop solar, purely residential systems, and aggregating them, and so they're actually at scale function like a traditional power plant. And I just started to mention, I didn't really actually introduce who Sunrun was. So Sunrun, my company, is the leading residential solar and storage company in the country. We have over 1 million customers nationally with over 250,000 batteries. So when we think about aggregating those resources, that's over 4.3 gigawatts hours of network storage capacity just from Sunrun's resources. So that's pretty wild and pretty huge, and this is something that we're doing at scale all the time. About 50% of our customers are in California, which is pretty amazing. And with all of those customers in California, on a go-ahead basis, we install a battery with every rooftop system we install. So when we think about the resources that Sunrun can provide to the grid, we're actually already doing the thing, right? This is not a technology of the future anymore. So for the past few years, we've been participating in a number of different statewide programs, and actually just this morning released a new press release announcing our support for the California grid this summer through 2 different grid emergency programs. That's, we have about, I think it's 110,000 customers enrolled in emergency grid programs this summer, sending about 435 megawatts back to the grid every time our resources are called upon. That's the equivalent of a traditional peaker power plant, so really huge. And that's one kind of EPP, is kind of an emergency grid resource where we look at all this capacity and we send it back to the grid when there's emergency grid conditions or the price of electricity becomes really high. Another type of resource, or a different flavor, let's say, of a distributed power plant is a transmission and distribution type of distributed power plant. And that's some of the work we'll get into a little bit later that we're doing with Edison, we do with PG&E, and we do it across the country. So that's actually locating where are the certain zip codes or substations or really locational points in the grid that we might need upgrades, or we might need to figure out how do we create a little bit extra headroom, right, for some kind of peak capacity need. And that's a different kind of flavor of virtual power plant. So there's lots of different varieties of how do you look at all these aggregated resources and make them get to work for the grid in an affordable way that support the really important work, right, that our utilities are already doing.
All right, thanks, Lauren. So Paul, so similar to the work we're doing with Sunrun, we also have Edison also has an opportunity to partner with Schneider Electric, specifically to deploy a new type of substation technology to help us expand in a more reliable, smaller footprint in an affordable manner. Can you talk about this new substation technology that we're partnering with you on?
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and thanks to Lacey for hosting an incredible event here. As Mark mentioned, I'm Paul Carp with Schneider Electric. We're a global energy technology provider headquartered in France. Hopefully we won't talk about the results of the World Cup game. And really what we do is we partner with large customers. So it's utilities like SCE, it's airports, it's ports, it's hotel chains, large infrastructure companies. And we try to do things at scale. So this is hardware, software, and things like grid modernization projects. And so Mark talked a little bit about his purview overseeing substations at SCE. And substations on average across the US are about 40 to 50 years old. These are, you probably see them in your communities. You might not know what a substation is, but you've definitely seen them. It's often kind of open air in a large yard. You'll see fences. And then electrical equipment. A lot of that electrical equipment is, like I said, it's dated. It's exposed to the elements, to weather. You'll have rodents, for example, come in and cause outages in an entire neighborhood. And so there's definitely an opportunity to upgrade that infrastructure. And so the project we're taking on is called Compact Substation, and we're bringing in switchgear, which switchgear you can think of as an air traffic control system for a substation, right? It turns on and off the power, it distributes it to feeders and to your neighborhoods, and then it has fault detection and safety systems built in to make sure the power is distributed safely. And so the Compact Substation project is really, we're starting off with 2 pilots. One is in northern LA County near Palmdale. The other is in the San Bernardino Mountains near Big Bear. And really it's about the objectives that Mark laid out. So it's, it's a smaller footprint, it's driving reliability, and then it's also, just lowering overall maintenance and overall cost to ratepayers in the SC territory.
All right. And maybe just hearing your description, it really very much sounds like when you look at the substation, traditionally it's this large, kind of like open field, and what I'm hearing is this is basically like a substation in a box. So with that there, can you talk about a little bit more about some of the benefits about it being enclosed?
Yeah, so think of it as the size of a refrigerator, a large refrigerator. And this technology isn't new. This has been around for a long time. So it's called gas-insulated switchgear. It's commonly used in Europe, in Asia, and other parts of the world. And really what it is like you said, it's an enclosed box. And so it really uses pure air and vacuum technology to make sure that the system runs reliably. And so what's different about this is that it really requires almost no maintenance. And it's incredibly seismically sound, incredibly reliable technology that really allows the SCE team to rather than coming in and having regular maintenance, you can rely on remote monitoring, thermal monitoring, things like that to and spread your O&M resources to other parts of the service territory.
All right, thank you, Lauren. So as Sunrun, they're fully aware of like all the speed to power issues that are out there in the market today. It's no secret that power is a big commodity that a lot of customers are looking for, and they're looking to connect really, really fast, much faster than what utilities have traditionally seen over the last decade. How is Sunrun positioning itself to offer utilities and even other customers faster, reliable, responsive grid service?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Mark. I think this is a moment in time where, for the first time, I don't even remember the stat, but in many, many years, right, we're actually in a period where electricity demand is actually growing, right? We're not shrinking our demand for electricity, which is not a bad thing. We're talking about all the electrification initiatives we're doing, electrifying homes, electrifying transportation. That's super important. And then, of course, there are data centers. And so there's a real need, right, not to think about just how do we use the grid of the 1800s to power the innovation of 2026? Well, no, actually, we can innovate on that. And so one thing that Sunrun actually just recently announced a few weeks ago is we have a new partnership with Renew Home, which is kind of like those Google Nest thermostats you have, and with Tesla. And our 3 companies combined have over 16.6 gigawatts. And sorry, these are wonky energy terms, but that's massive, right? A nuclear power plant is 1 gigawatt. 16.6 gigawatts of distributed energy resources sitting in homes across the country. And so we're actually offering like a speed to power capacity offering for data centers and large loads to come work with us and kind of a bring your own capacity type of scenario, right? Where how do we not, create massive increases in bills for ratepayers? How do we meet this moment with the technology that we actually have, support the electric grid, and not raise rates like crazy for everyday people? So it's an affordability moment, and it's also a speed to power moment. And the speed to power concept, which is a term that now all of a sudden is very ubiquitous in our little energy ecosystem. It's real, right? So when we think about building out the grid, it may take many years. I know that your work is coming online really quickly, and Edison and our other utility partners are working to bring resources online very quickly. But let's say, a large-scale user wants to build an AI data center. It could take 5-10 years to build out the grid. But what we can do is literally within months, aggregate those customers that we have, and through software, send those electrons back to the grid and offer kind of peak capacity. And so when we think about our Olympics moment here in LA, it's really no different, right? So whether we're talking about kind of speed to power because we need extra capacity, or because we have constrained transmission and distribution feeders or substations, and we want to kind of create that headroom for load, thinking about all these resources, whether it's this new partnership we have or Sunrun alone, there are so many solutions that we have to offer that are really beyond kind of what we had originally ever thought we could do. And so, for this Olympics moment, I've geeked out about this with Lacey for a couple of years now, but I mean, how cool would it be, right, for the LA Games to be the first games that are actually really powered by the people, and to do some kind of virtual power plant with all of those, hundreds of thousands of customers across the LA basin, and working with partners like Edison, and we have more stuff we can talk about that we're working on together. But this is a real moment in time, and it's actually nothing new. It's things that we're doing all the time. These resources can come online in a matter of months, and so just really exciting times as we think about the sustainability cornerstone of the Olympics. We're talking about fashion, we're talking about transportation. Why does our electric grid have to be any different? Why can't we innovate here and actually showcase Los Angeles and our residents and all those rooftop solar systems and those batteries and our thermostats and our technology that we have at our fingertips to do something really meaningful for Los Angeles?
Thanks, Lauren. So Paul, Schneider Electric, they're a global technology leader and worked with many different utilities, different countries. Are there some suggested best practices that Schneider Electric has seen with working with these other utilities, other countries, these other partners on what's the best way to be able to adopt and scale some of this new innovation? And maybe along the way, like what are some elements of forming a good partnership?
Yeah, I think, first off, Edison, as they were going down this process, engaged in a couple of industry forums. So there was one in Irwindale, one in Pomona last year, where they really just invited the industry to come together, and they laid out their challenges. So, the CEO, Steve Powell, was there, Shinjini was there, senior leadership came and said, these are the challenges we're facing on the grid. What do you, the industry, have to offer? And they brought a whole diverse set of stakeholders. So it's, engineering, system planning, operations, maintenance, procurement, leadership. The entire range of stakeholders were there, really just to listen and kind of hear what's out there. And then, the Edison team also traveled to substations around the world. So they went to Europe, they went to Asia, and really looked for best practices. So rather than just kind of doing things the same way that we've been doing things for, 50, 100 years, it's seek best practices, and then be willing to kind of take a risk and be a little bit more innovative on the design. So I have to give praise to the SCE team for kind of the way they engaged. But then also, because there's so many different stakeholders, and this is new technology that's coming that the substation team hadn't seen before, there's a really big change management piece and a training component to make sure that the folks that are going to be maintaining the equipment really understand what it is, understand how it works, that there's spare parts, and that if there is a failure or some sort of issue comes up, that they'll be able to troubleshoot that. So I think that's a big part of it too, is just the people side of it.
Thank you, Paul. And maybe one more question here. So I've heard a lot of great positive remarks about some of the innovation that we've done. You've also heard what I mentioned, Edison's commitment to the games. We're looking to accelerate our builds, modernize with new technologies, as well as make the grid more resilient. From your both organizations, what are some commitments that you're looking to make to be able to help support the utilities in the Southern California region?
Yeah, I'll talk about distributed power plants again. And one thing I hadn't mentioned just yet is a really exciting new pilot, and is actually the first time I'm allowed to publicly speak about it, that we're doing with Edison, which is a transmission and distribution distributed power plant, where Edison actually identified 250 or so zip codes within their service territory. We very quickly identified about 1,000 customers within those zip codes, and Edison is piloting kind of a multi-distributed energy resource orchestration pilot, where they're going to be working with our home batteries and with thermostats and seeing how these multi kind of DERs can work together to support kind of specific locations in the service territory. So building upon that really exciting work, we're doing, again, this all over the country with utilities all over the country. And I'll just double click on what I said before, which is, as a Los Angelino, it would make me so happy to be able to say Sunrun was helping power the games, and not really Sunrun, right? All of our customers and all of our homes that have batteries across the region. So I guess this is an open offer to Edison and DWP, like, let's work together, let's actually bring this technology to the world and show them that it's not anything new or anything fancy. It's just, power for the people, by the people, for all of our visitors and our home and our athletes. So it would be a pretty awesome thing to do.
Great. Paul?
Yeah, I think from Schneider's perspective, it's important to focus on the outcomes that you want versus the technology and kind of getting wrapped into the weeds. So the outcomes in this case were, driving reliability, affordability, resilience, things like that. And I think Schneider Electric is a global leader. We have technical resources, we have access to capital. We have a team here that focuses on working with cities, counties, ports, large customers. And so I think it's about kind of coming together and just really getting aligned. And I think with LA28, there's a lot of different stakeholders. But we're 2 years out, so I think it's important just to sit down and just get aligned on those outcomes.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you both. Today's discussion really highlighted how partnerships really matter, and really the work that we're doing is more than just meeting the single event, but really developing these technologies to have a long-lasting legacy long after the game. So with that thank you all for joining us today.